Yeah, I'll just grab that as well. But I have gone old school and got notes and things, so please bear with me. But I'm Bhavina. I work at Make UK as Head of Policy and Campaigns. So our job is to be the voice of manufacturing to government. So as you can imagine, I am very, very busy right now. I have covered my bags, though. So Make UK is the trade association for manufacturers. So we represent 20,000 across the UK, from some of your largest to some of your smallest family-run businesses. And what I'll be sharing today is the results of a couple of studies that we've been doing to really understand what is driving the changing way in which we work in our sector. Now, if you speak to any manufacturer, the first thing they will tell you, the first challenge they always face is people, finding the right people with the right skills for their business. It's not always things like digitalisation, it's not always the barriers to investment, it's having the right people, because having that unlocks everything else. So, just make sure everything's working okay, great. So, like I said, I'll be sharing a few results from a few studies that we've been doing, the first of which is around unlocking the skills needed for a digital and green future. So this is something we did last year to really drive our thinking about what are the big trends affecting manufacturers. We then recently published a piece of work around 2030 skills. So what kind of skills will we need in 2030 and how can manufacturers be prepared for that in the future? And then you're going to get an exclusive here today. We're publishing another piece of work. I told you we were busy. Around leadership and management. And that's coming out in a couple of weeks. And we'll be sharing a little bit around why leadership and management skills are so crucial to unlocking the kind of future for our success, for our sector and making it so successful. But crucially, the thread that runs through all of that work is that the nature of UK manufacturing is changing. Every single business we talk to is adapting to this change and they're going through it as we speak. But they will need help with this journey. Some businesses are a lot further along and some businesses aren't. So what I'm going to highlight today is kind of what those changes are and how it's impacting the very people, the 2.5 million people that work in our sector. And at the end, I'm just going to share a few recommendations of what we are calling from government. So what is changing manufacturing? What's driving all of this profound change in our sector? Well, there's four things that we've identified: automation, digitalisation, net zero or greenification. Appreciate that is a very policy wonk. Oh, it's not going. Oh, it's. There we go. I need digital skills, clearly. Need upskilling, see? And then lastly, flexible working. So a trend that we've seen post-pandemic, which is driving how businesses think about how they recruit, but also crucially retain their staff. There's two other factors that are also driving that change in our sector. One is the chronic labour shortage that we face in our sector. So there are currently 95,000 vacancies in our sector. But also, and we've touched on this a little bit earlier, the lack of incentives there are for young people to join our sector. It's not often considered cool or sexy, but actually, I've found when you go into a manufacturing site, it is really interesting, but you've got to get them through the door, and that's the difficult bit. So you're getting the hang of it now. So automation and digitalisation, I'm sure that's the bit that you guys are really interested in. So what are we finding? Well, our research shows that 91% of manufacturers have benefited from the adoption of new technologies during the pandemic. And what we found is that a quarter saw their productivity actually increase during the pandemic, which is quite an incredible feat. But what are the kind of digital developments that manufacturers are turning to in their businesses? So I've mentioned a few up there: nanotechnology, 5G, robots, VR, all those cool things that when you speak to young people, they want to be involved with, but until you can get them through the door, they don't quite see it. But that has a profound impact on people that work in the business. So what we found is that 6 in 10 manufacturers believe automation is the #1 driver to the changing need for jobs and skills in their sector. Half cited wider digitalisation, but I think the fact that they mentioned automation is really key. So for that reason, manufacturers are making digital skills a priority. So here's the exclusive. Our research for our upcoming Innovation Monitor will show that 7 in 10 manufacturers are investing in digital skills now for the future. This is focusing on areas like IT, software management, data analysis, but crucially, cybersecurity. But in doing this research, what it actually highlighted is there's a huge digital skills gap. And what we found is that the biggest barrier for adoption new technology was people. Finding the right people who could help adopt this technology. And I'll touch on leadership and management a little bit later. So actually, we welcome the government's Help to Grow digital scheme. Is it perfect? No. Is it a step in the right direction? Certainly, because it can help SMEs to take that first step in adopting technology. Unfortunately, adoption is very low. So actually, only 7% of manufacturers have used the Help to Grow digital scheme. And I think that kind of says everything in how the scheme is designed and what we need to do to change it. So what's that second trend? Net zero, and my favorite word, greenification. So although manufacturing is traditionally a large greenhouse gas emitter, most manufacturers are fully aware that they have a key role to play if we are to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And what we found is that most have a net zero plan, most are driving towards it, but just again need a little bit of support in taking that first step. So from our report on decarbonising of manufacturing, we found that half of companies told us that they were already implementing their decarbonisation plans, and a further quarter will be beginning in the next 12 months. Now, I think that's quite profound given the energy crisis we are in right now. If anything, it is driving more manufacturers to start thinking about greenification. And what we found in our research is that the way to do that is by adopting new technology, to become more energy efficient, to use technology to unlock that. And again, greenification is driving the skills need in our sector as well. So we find that 2/5 of manufacturers believe that greenification will change how they operate and the skills that they need. So what we suggested is actually thinking about how manufacturers and the government can work together to explore something like the Help to Grow Green program. So we've seen digital, we've seen management. What about Help to Grow Green? Helping SMEs to unlock that green future, to become more energy efficient, and to use technology to support that. And the third area is really around flexible working. So post-pandemic and pre-pandemic, it feels like two different worlds. I mean, there was a point when I didn't think I would be here speaking to real people in the flesh, but actually I'm quite glad we are. But equally, there's a benefit that we have found from working from home, working remotely. And I think for manufacturers, that has been quite a difficult change. As you can imagine, you can't take the production line home. You can only 3D print so much. So actually, the split between what you can offer to a non-production member of staff and a production member of staff is quite different. So what we found is just over 1/4 of manufacturers are currently unable to offer production employees any form of flexible working. Instead, what they are doing is offering things like individual hours, shifts, and part-time working. But where you see the profound difference is that 90% of manufacturers can offer flexible working for non-production staff. Now, when we think about trying to recruit the next generation, that next generation of creators, innovators, and makers, the first question you always get asked, and I've done this because I've been recruiting, is, can I work remotely? Can I work from home one day? Now, that becomes incredibly difficult in the manufacturing sector. And there's only so much we can do to offer flexibility. So I think it's a key challenge that manufacturers will have to address in the future. But unfortunately, young people, if you are listening to this, you can't take the production line home. But hopefully, if you come into the office, you can see that it is actually a cool environment to work in, and you want to be learning from others around you. And then finally, management and leadership skills. It feels quite apt to be talking about this topic right now, Good managers and good leaders can take employees through profound change. They take their people with them when they go through changes like greenification, the adoption of technology, or any kind of major change. So in an upcoming piece of work with Rockwell Automation, we're highlighting the importance of this skill for the future of our sector, because actually good managers and good leaders can drive through these changes. So as the sector adapts, as we change, leaders are going to have a key role to play in the transition to net zero and the adoption of digital practices. And manufacturers agree. 8 in 10 agreed with that statement. But what makes a good leader? How do you find a good leader? Well, manufacturers told us it's not length of service and it's not the professional qualifications that you have. It's the ability to communicate with your staff. When you're going through that change, the ability to share that journey and say, I'm with you on that, is the key bit. So for SMEs in particular, we found that's quite difficult because time and resources, they are constrained. They don't have that because they've got so many other things on their plate. So actually what we're saying to government is think about how you can expand the Help to Grow management scheme. That can help businesses to become better businesses, to transition to net zero, to adopt new technology. But unless you can provide them the support, they won't be able to take that first step. We make a couple of other recommendations to government as well, as you can imagine. And a couple of those are first, as I mentioned, the expansion of the Help to Grow management scheme, making it less restrictive and more applicable to more businesses. But the second is also to explore how we can introduce an employer training fund. Whenever I speak to a manufacturer, the second thing they say after people is a problem is, I can't use my apprenticeship levy funding. That is designed, I can see someone laughing here because they know it's always a problem. The apprenticeship levy was designed to be a win-win situation for all businesses. I put a bit in, I invest in my people, I get a little bit back. But it's turned into a lose-lose. But there are ways that we can fix this. And what we're saying is where there is unspent levy funds, use that to be able to train up your staff to adapt to these new profound changes. And you can do that through something like an employer training fund, thinking about how you can maybe transfer some of that money to also your supply chain, because crucially, it's your SMEs that will sit in your supply chain that will need help. The third thing we're asking from government is also to introduce a training investment allowance. Tax-based measures are always really good at incentivizing the right behavior from businesses. So what we're suggesting to the Treasury is to use that as a way to incentivize businesses to invest in their people. But I think in all the work, in all the stats that I've thrown at you and all the suggestions, this is a really, really difficult challenge. And manufacturers are in the same boat as all other businesses. They're competing for talent, not just with the manufacturer down the road, but other industries as well. It has become a fight for talent. And what we need to do better as a sector is sell our sector better so that young people want to work in our sector, but also stay. But it also means embracing the challenges that we have in front of us, digitalisation, net zero, and actually taking our employees with us. So if there are any businesses listening, what I would suggest is actually embrace the change, because good businesses who embrace it actually end up being a lot further ahead. And it's not just about profit, as we mentioned. It's actually about purpose, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. If you can get those people into your business, you will be successful, you will thrive, and crucially, you will finally make a difference and do better for the good of the world. So I hope that helps, and I'm happy to take any questions.